Well, welcome online, watching, listening. I think all of us somewhere along the line have asked this question in our lives before. Who am I forgetting? Who am I forgetting? Maybe you're a engaged couple busy trying to put that wedding list together and you look at one another like, who are we forgetting? Or maybe you're the boss trying to organize an end of year function. You add up the numbers, someone's missing, like, who am I forgetting? Or perhaps you want to send out Christmas cards because you're born before 1960, and you say to your husband, you say to your wife, who are we forgetting? And why do we ask that question? Well, we don't want to forget that someone. And today's message, and that's the title of today's message, Who Are We Forgetting? Is just a light-hearted look at that very question. Because we don't want to forget someone, but there's more to it than that. And hopefully by the end of the message, you're going to have an answer. And what are you going to do with that answer? And for us to do that, we're going to be looking at 3 Old Testament historical stories. We're going to look at someone who forgot someone. We're going to look at someone who almost forgot someone. And then we're going to look at someone who made sure they wouldn't forget that someone. Don't you find it interesting how God helps us in life with stories? Easy to remember, entertaining, life lesson, life-changing stories. That's what we're going to look at today. Now, I want to just give you a little bit of where did they happen? Where did they take place? Obviously, it's not in the 1960s. What's the era? So one of our stories plays out 1,400 years BC. So we're almost looking at close to 3,500 years ago. And just for interest's sake, that's when humanity started inventing steel and started making chariots. And I know the ladies are looking and they're kind of bored already. Well, ladies, it's the same time or the same era that we invented the brush. How ladies coped without a brush before that era is still a historical mystery. Very difficult to clean a floor without a brush. Right, I'm just joking. The other era is 1,000 years BC. What are we inventing there? Well, it's the first time we started flying kites. So all the kids are going, yes! And it's the same time that we invented the dictionary. And all the kids are going, oh. And then the other era is 600 years BC. What happened in that time? Well, we as humanity got tired of smashing our ships on rocks, so we decided, why don't we put a light up on a hill? So we created lighthouses. And then the other thing is we got super tired of exchanging chickens for iPads. I mean, it takes about 10,000 chickens for one iPad, or tomatoes for a car. Goodness knows how many tomatoes that would be. So we thought, why don't we start creating or making coins? So I want to zoom in on that era first, where we've started working with coins and lighthouses, 600 years BC. There's a king in Babylon by the name of Neb. All right, his proper name is Nebuchadnezzar, the king of this Babylonian empire. Dads, there's a bit of a December fun family game that you can have. You can put 200 Rand on the table and say to the family, anyone who can spell Nebuchadnezzar right gets the $200. I can promise you, your money will be safe. But anyway, this Neb is on the throne of Babylon. It's one of the strongest empires the world has ever seen. It covered most of the Middle East, some 600 years BC. And you can check the story out in the Old Testament. It's really interesting. And I can just picture him one beautiful summer's evening. He's walking on the balcony of his palace, and he's overlooking this incredible city, which is the first city in history, by the way, to have 200,000 inhabitants. And he's probably got a view of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And in that moment, on that balcony, he says this statement out loud. It kind of sounds like a tweet from a particular 21st century president. It's kind of similar. Let's have a look at what he says. He says, look at this, Babylon the Great. And I built it all by myself. A royal palace adequate to display my honor and glory. Wow. And what's so fascinating, in that moment, he comes down with a condition which we now know in the 21st century, psychologists, psychiatrists will tell you, it's a real condition called lycanthropy. Right in that moment, in that instant, he now believes he's an animal. He becomes a cow. In fact, for the next 7 years, he goes into the field and grazes and lives like a cow. Neb forgot someone. Who did he forget? Well, he forgot 2 someones, in fact. Let's look at the first someone. Neb forgot Dan, short for Daniel, one of his advisors, kind of like a Fauci to the Trump. You see, a year previous or prior to this incident, Neb had a dream, a rather strange dream, of this stunning, beautiful tree, but next thing, this tree gets chopped down. And he's kind of bugged by that dream. And Dan is the one who interpreted for him. And a year prior to this incident says to him, that's your story. That's going to happen to you. And that's exactly what happened as this king goes from being a powerful king to a cow. But what's so interesting when you read the story is Dan gave him some advice and said, it doesn't have to be your story if you just remain humble. But of course, Neb forgot. But Neb forgot someone else. Neb forgot Nab. I'm not making this up, I promise. You're not going to read this in the Bible. This is some extra history research that I did, and you can go and check it out for yourself. You say, who on earth is Nab? It's his dad. It's short for Nabopolassar, another bizarre name. Why do I say Neb forgot his dad, Nab? Well, you see, Nabopolassar is the one who defeated the huge and powerful Assyrian Empire. That is one of the cruelest, strongest, longest reigning empires that the world had ever seen. And this man is the one who conquered them. This is the man who kind of put Babylon on the map. This is the guy who paved the way for his son, Neb. But Neb thinks it's all his own doing. Neb forgot his dad, Nab, and he forgot Dan. But let's jump now further back in history. Let's go to that era of 1400 BC of brushes and chariots. The superpower of that time is Egypt. And there's a king or a pharaoh, we don't know his name, but ironically, he also has some dreams which he finds disturbing. He has this dream of 7 healthy, happy cows, fat cows, in fact, grazing on the side of the Nile, and next thing, 7 unhealthy cows climb out of the Nile and eat the fat cows. It disturbs him. He wakes up. He's very upset, but falls asleep again, only to have a similar dream where their 7 healthy heads of grain get eaten by 7 unhealthy heads of grain. Now he wakes up super stressed because this king knows there's more to these 2 dreams. He calls in all his supervisors, all the clever people in the country. No one can interpret this dream. It's like there's this national crisis. There's stress in the palace. But I want to drop in and read part of this narrative, a rather interesting interaction between this king, this pharaoh, and one of his servants. And it's pretty funny as well. So the head cupbearer then spoke up and said to Pharaoh, I just remembered something. I'm sorry. I should have told you this long ago. Well, he's right. This incident happened 2 years ago, and he had forgotten. So here he goes, and he says, once when Pharaoh got angry with his servants, he locked me and the head baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Now, can I just pause here? Remember I said to you, God's stories help us in life. I think there's a bit of practical advice right there. I think it's quite humorous. If ever you find yourself in a position, hopefully not, but if ever you're on parole, never tell people that you've just left Modabi. Tell them you've just left a huge government official's house or building. It just sounds a lot better than jail. And that's what this guy's doing. In fact, he's trying to make sure he doesn't get Pharaoh all ticked off again before he's back in jail. Then I'm also thinking, what on earth did these poor guys do? Did that baker make some bad donuts, which in my opinion does deserve jail? But anyway, he carries on. He says to the Pharaoh, he says, we both had dreams on the same night, and each dream had its own meaning. And it so happened that there was this young Hebrew slave there with us, and he also belonged to the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, each dream separately. And then listen to this. He says, then things turned out exactly as he interpreted. I was returned to my position, hence I'm here today, and the baker was impaled. He got the point. Don't make bad donuts. So, what's happening here? This cupbearer almost forgets a rather significant individual in his life, Joseph. We know how the story carries on. Joseph gets called in, interprets Pharaoh's dream, saves the day. But what I want to highlight is this cupbearer almost forgot him. But let's look at our third story. 1,000 years before Jesus Christ, when we're flying kites and reading dictionaries, let's look at another king by the name of David, king of Israel. It's a rather interesting story and interaction with this guy. And you're going to go and check it out for yourself in Samuel. So here we go. And I want to read this to you because there's one or two lines that are so important and so special in this story. So here we go. One day, David asked, is there anyone left in Saul's family? If so, I'd like to show him some kindness in honor of Jonathan. So just a reminder, Saul was the previous king, wasn't family of David. In fact, he was pretty much David's enemy. And Jonathan, Saul's son, and those two were good friends, David and Jonathan. In fact, Jonathan saved David's life. And here he wants to show some kindness to Jonathan, or at least his family. So he says, it carries on, it says, and so it happened that there was a servant in Saul's household named Ziba working in the palace. So they called him into David's presence. And the king asked him, are you Ziba? Yes, sir. Then he asked, is there anyone left in the family of Saul whom I can show? And he ramps this line up. He says, who I can show, listen to this, godly kindness. Ziba told the king, well, yes, there is, Jonathan's son, who's lame in both feet. Well, where is he? Well, he's living in the home of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lodebar. Don't let anyone say that the Bible or history is boring. I mean, I find that so funny. Lodebar, not Raisdebar or Hydebar. It's in Lodebar, which I'm thinking that sounds the back end of town. Then I go and check it out. It was the ghetto part of town. So please note this. This young boy or this young man is lame in both feet. He probably can't provide for himself, and he has to stay with someone in the back end of town. Watch this line. King David didn't lose a minute. He sent for him and got him from the home of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar. When Mephibosheth, that's his name, another spelling contest for the family, son of Jonathan, who was the son of Saul, came before David, he bowed down low, abasing himself and honoring David. Well, abasing, that's not a word we often use in the English language. It's like self-loathing, putting yourself down. And the reason he's doing that is because back in that culture, if a new family took over the throne, they would wipe out the previous family. They want to make sure that no one else takes over our position. So this young man is probably thinking, this king is about to wipe me out. Let me just try and put myself down as much as I can and honor him. But let's see how David handles this. He says, don't be frightened. I'd like to, I love this line, do something special for you in memory of your father, Jonathan. To begin with, I'm returning all the properties of your grandfather, Saul, to you. Now, let's picture this. This guy's been staying with someone in the back end of town, and next thing he gets given a property portfolio from royalty. I can picture beach houses and farms and palaces. And then he says, furthermore, from now on, you will take all your meals with me at my table. 3 rather interesting stories. Neb forgot. Cupbearer almost forgot. David made sure he wouldn't forget. Who are you, or who am I forgetting? Or where am I going with these stories? Or where am I going with this question? You see, there are people in all of our lives who have contributed. They've contributed positively and significantly, and sometimes incredibly, and sometimes sacrificially to where you are today. And that needs to be acknowledged. And that needs to be appreciated. It definitely shouldn't be forgotten. Now, maybe you're sitting there saying, well, Mark, forgotten is quite a strong word. I haven't forgotten how they were there for me, or how that friend stood by me in that time, or how that person gave me that lucky break. I definitely haven't forgotten, but now that you mention it, I never said anything, or I never spoke to them about it, or I really do appreciate them, but I don't think they know I appreciate them. Or perhaps it happened so long ago, maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, life just happened. Or I was so down and out back then, I couldn't even afford to send them for dinner. I couldn't even afford a bunch of flowers. Or I was so wrapped up or so distracted by my own crisis and my own pain, I didn't say anything, or I didn't do anything. And perhaps there is that teacher or that coach from years ago that believed in you when no one else did. Or maybe there is that friend who really came alongside of you in your mess when it felt like everyone else deserted you. Or maybe there is that parent that sacrificed huge to put you through university. Or maybe there is that individual who gave you that job when you really didn't deserve it and you had zero experience. Or maybe there is that small group leader or that pastor who just cautioned you, just warned you in the direction you were going, and you look back and you think, thank goodness they did that. Maybe this just happened yesterday. Maybe in this crazy 2020, maybe 2 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, where someone helped you, provided for you, protected you, maybe covered for you. Have you done anything about that? Have you acknowledged that, perhaps in some way? Or have you become like a Neb or a cupbearer and almost forgotten? You see, here's the key. God uses people to bless people. God uses beautiful, precious people to bless people. And I don't want to take those people for granted. I don't want to forget about those people. I don't want to be a Neb. I don't want to be a cupbearer. I want to be like David and do something. And perhaps say something. And be humble and grateful. Several years ago, I was in my late 20s, my good friend Brendan, also in his late 20s, and Leonard, let's just say he wasn't in his late 20s. The three of us were just chatting, socializing, talking rubbish as young guys would. And then somewhere, somehow, we became quite philosophical. I can't remember the details, it was too long ago, but the three of us were just chatting about our parents and the homes that we grew up in that were just so stable, and how they provided, and they just made life so much easier for us. And then one of us, I don't know who, said, well, let's do something about that. So we came up with a plan. Hannibal, Murdoch, and Mr. T. All right, bad 80s joke. We came up with this plan where we'd invite our parents for a dinner. In fact, we booked a restaurant in Santon and an exclusive table in a quiet corner. But here's the plan. We weren't going to tell our parents that others would be there. We'd just fetch them, say we're going for dinner. We made sure we got the timing right. And you can imagine, here's Leonard's Dad, Pastor Derek, Auntie Annette, and Brendan's folks and my folks, and they all kind of meet up together with us in this fancy restaurant in Santon. We sit down at the table, and we each, the three of us, took a moment, not long, just a moment, to say publicly, in front of everyone else, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad, for what you've done in our lives. You see, we as young guys didn't want to be like Neb. We don't want to say, well, look what we've achieved and we've done it all by ourselves. No, our folks, as it were, had laid a foundation that almost made it impossible for us to fail as young guys. Who are you perhaps forgetting? And sometimes, here's the weird thing, sometimes they're right under our noses. Someone popping in your head. Do something. In fact, I got my folks sitting here today. They're the only ones beside the wonderful technical crew that help us every week. They're the only ones in an auditorium of 3,000, because I want them to hear that again. Thank you. And in fact, forgive me for being opportunistic, because I'm going to say publicly to Leonard and my beautiful wife, I wouldn't be where I am in life today if it wasn't for you. I'm humble and grateful. Maybe you need to send a WhatsApp. Maybe you need to pick up the phone and make a call or send a voice note. Maybe it's time you say, but it happened 20 years ago, who cares? Buy the flowers, buy the chocolate, buy the car. Say something. Do something. 2,000 years ago, Paul writes 2 letters to a church in Corinth, Greece. I want to zoom in on that first letter that he wrote, because there's a chapter in that letter that I think is probably one of the most read pieces of literature in all of history. Because it is just so beautiful, so powerful, as he describes and unpacks the true definition of love. But he makes a point that I want to zoom in on together. So let's have a look. We know this so well. 1 Corinthians 13. Here he goes. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Now, I want to do something with that verse for a second. I want to make some 180-degree changes. I want to do some opposites with this verse, but keep the same meaning. You say, what on earth are you talking about? It'll make sense as we do this together. Firstly, I want to point out, you see how he flicks between positive and negatives. So I want to switch those around. So what do I mean by positive or negative? Note he says love is patient. That is a positive. Love is patient. How else could I say that in an opposite way, but still say the same thing? I could say love is not impatient. And love is not unkind. Well, let's carry on. Love does not envy. So I could say, but love rejoices in the success of others. I could say that. It does not boast. It is not proud. In other words, it keeps quiet when it should, and love is humble. It does not dishonor others. So easy, I could say love honors others. It is not self-seeking. In other words, love is others-seeking, not easily angered. So I could say love remains calm. But here's where I want to zoom in for a second. Because it says, love, it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. How about I change that? Do a 180, but keep a similar meaning. Love keeps a record of rights, of blessings. Love doesn't forget the blessings received from the hands and the mouths and the wallets and the schedules of people. It keeps record. And it does something. And perhaps it keeps doing something about it. We could do the same thing with another line that we know so well. We've said before in our lives, I need to forgive and forget. So true, because people fail us, people hurt us, people will disappoint us. Forgive and forget. But when they help us, when they bless us, when they do something for us, surely we should thank and remember. God uses people to bless people. I wouldn't be where I am in my life if it wasn't for the people in my life. And the heart and the reason behind this message is these are values that we pursue as a Maranatha family. We're always pursuing humility and gratitude. And that's the reason behind the question, who am I forgetting? Because I want to stay humble and grateful, and it should lead to some kind of proactivity. I don't want to be a Neb or a cupbearer. I want to be like a David. Also, 2,000 years ago, in closing, Jesus heals 10 lepers. How many come back and say thank you? One. Just one. And when we read the story, we kind of shake our heads. Mathematically, that's 10%. Would you be in the 10%? Or are you perhaps forgetting someone? Let's be like David. Let's keep a record of rights. Let's, as I said, there's some amazing lines in that passage. Let's not waste a minute. Let's do something special. Let's do something that is godly kindness to the people who have blessed us in our lives. Amen. Come, let's pray. Lord, thank you for stories. They're entertaining, they're amusing, but the lessons are incredible. And when we look at these three characters, God, we can stand back and say, I don't want to be a Nebuchadnezzar. I don't want to be that cupbearer. I want to be like your servant David. Don't want to lose a minute. I want to remain humble and grateful. Who do I need to thank? And maybe they did something years ago, Lord. It doesn't matter. Help me. Give me a creative idea. Give me the courage. May I remain humble and grateful to the precious people in my life. Amen. Bless you.